My daughter pushed me off the yacht for not giving her $98,000. Then she froze the next morning when she saw me, perfectly fine and talking to the police. The day began with calm seas and a clear sky, the kind of weather that makes you believe nothing can go wrong. I'd rented the yacht 2 months in advance, 60-foot deck, white leather interior, mahogany railings, because I wanted this birthday to be quiet, but still meaningful. Just family, no strangers, no business partners. A rare thing these days. She stood near the bow when I came up from below deck. My daughter, Emily, 25, smart, charismatic, dangerous, though I didn't want to admit that back then. She was dressed like it was her party, not mine. Sharp red dress, gold earrings that sparkled against the horizon, and when I stepped onto the main deck, she didn't even pretend to be happy to see me. "You owe me," she said, without hesitation, $98,000. That's the number. I paused. For what? For everything, she answered flatly. Everything you didn't do. My education, my apartment, the car I had to sell last month, the job I lost because you never helped me make connections. You always had the money, Dad. You just never gave it. I didn't raise my voice. There was no point in arguing about numbers she pulled from thin air. You want me to pay you because I didn't help you fail slower? Her eyes didn't blink. Just a smile curling up, slow and calculated. You're lucky it's not more. I stepped back, leaned against the railing, and exhaled once. No. She didn't argue, didn't plead or shout, just looked down at her manicured nails and said, "Okay." Then, before I could register it, her hands were on my chest. One hard shove. The deck vanished beneath my feet. The cold hit like a brick wall. No one heard me fall. The music was too loud, and no one thought to count how many were still on board. I bobbed once, twice, then spotted the life ring drifting just a few feet away, maybe thrown earlier by accident, and never reeled back in. I clawed toward it, teeth chattering, lungs burning from the initial plunge. There were lights on the shoreline, distant, unreachable, but I didn't drown. Around 2 a.m, a fishing boat on a night run spotted me. The captain, an older man with a flashlight and no patience for dramatic stories, hauled me aboard. He handed me a blanket, said nothing, and radioed for the Coast Guard. From there, it moved quickly. I gave my statement to a patrol officer, calmly, carefully, no exaggeration. The truth was enough. I told them the name of the yacht, the crew manifest, the guests on board, my daughter included. Back at the dock by sunrise, I stepped off the boat in dry clothes provided by the officers. My shoes were soaked, but I didn't care. I stood straight. My back didn't bend. The officer beside me clipped the badge onto his belt. Another one followed, papers in hand, warrants already signed, coordinated overnight. Turns out I wasn't the only one noticing things. As we approached the marina, the crew member, Jackson, mid-30s, sharp eyes, quiet, was already talking to an officer, phone in hand. A recording. He'd captured her little speech from earlier in the day, standing just out of view when she laid out her price tag on my life. Then came the moment. Emily turned, holding a glass, eyes half-lidded with that same look of superiority she wore when she was 16 and thought skipping class was a rebellion worth praise. She spotted me first. Her jaw moved slightly, but no sound followed. The glass tilted. Her fingers went pale. Then she saw the badge, and the warrant, and the officer already moving in her direction. That smile she wore when she pushed me, gone. Erased in the instant it took for reality to register. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The dock turned silent the moment the officer read her name. No more chatter, no more laughter from the leftover guests, still lounging near the railing. Everyone who'd ignored my absence the night before suddenly paid attention. Emily didn't move at first. Not out of confusion, she understood exactly what was happening, but because she was calculating. That same mind that always stayed 2 steps ahead in boardrooms, debate teams, and interviews was now frozen, not because it stopped working, but because every move she had planned depended on one thing, me not coming back. The officer held out the warrant, her name printed clearly, charges typed line by line. She didn't reach for it. Instead, She turned her eyes toward the group behind the officer. 3 other uniformed men, 2 crew members, and Jackson holding his phone with the screen still on. Her lips parted slightly. "What is this?" she asked, voice low. "You're being detained for attempted murder and coercion," the officer answered. "You have the right to remain silent." She laughed once. Short. Sharp. "Murder? You're joking. He's standing right there." The badge didn't flinch. "Attempted." I stayed back, arms folded, not interfering. Watching. Letting her sit in the exact silence she left me in when I hit the water hours earlier. "Tell them," she said, looking past the officer now. "Dad, seriously. This is insane. You're not pressing charges, right? You know I didn't mean whatever this is." I didn't speak. "You were fine last night," she said again more quickly. "You were just drunk and slipped. Right? That's what happened. There's no story here. You're overreacting." Jackson stepped forward. "I recorded the whole thing," he said. "Yesterday. Up on the bow. You shoved him. We heard what you said." She whipped around. "You're siding with him?" He didn't respond. Another officer gently took her wrist and began to place the cuffs. She didn't struggle. Not yet. Her pride wouldn't allow it. Not in public. Not where faces could remember her fall more than her rise. But her eyes narrowed toward me. "You planned this," she said. "No, irraplia." "You did. You just didn't think I'd live long enough to see it." They walked her down the dock, step by step. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. That would come later. For now, it was strategy. Wait for the charges to fall apart. Wait for me to backtrack. Wait for the evidence to vanish. But it wouldn't. Not this time. I spent the next hour with the police. Statement updates. Timeline confirmation. Details about the yacht, who was on it, who stayed overnight. The staff was already turning. One of the stewards mentioned she asked about how far offshore we were before the trip. Another said she checked whether the surveillance cameras were turned off before we set sail. Each comment stitched together another piece of the picture she thought no one would paint. Later that morning, I returned to the house. Not the city one, but the coastal place, the one we'd only used for weekends. The lights were off, mail stacked on the entry table, and her coat still hanging by the door. I walked past it without touching anything. Upstairs, her bedroom door was open. Her laptop was still logged in. A legal pad lay on her desk with notes scribbled across the page. Phrases like inheritance plan, probate risk, and unfit to manage estate. She wasn't just reacting emotionally that night. She was building a legal argument behind closed doors, preparing to force my hand with paperwork if the physical threat didn't work. Her plan wasn't impulsive. It was layered. First financial pressure, then legal moves, and finally, if needed, elimination. Back downstairs, I sat at the kitchen table. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. My daughter didn't try to steal from me out of desperation. She did it out of design, out of belief that her future was more important than my life. And that changed everything. By mid-afternoon, my lawyer arrived. Her name was Dana Wallace, sharp-eyed and direct, the kind of person who didn't waste words and never softened blows. I handed her the recording, the written notes, the crew statements, and the background of everything leading up to the incident. She didn't blink once during the explanation. "We'll move on a protection order today," she said, "and freeze anything she might have access to financially. If she had access to your accounts, we'll shut them down. If she tried to file anything under your name in the last month, I'll find it." "She's got charm," I warned. "She can fake sincerity. She's used to getting out of corners." Dana looked up. So am I. The next morning, the headlines began to roll out. Not from us, but from someone on the dock who'd filmed the arrest. The video had already hit social media. Business heiress arrested after alleged yacht incident with father. Clickbait spun it further. But none of the attention was on me. The story, for now, was hers. And she couldn't spin it fast enough. Her lawyer called Dana, tried to negotiate a statement, tried to make it seem like it was a misunderstanding. Dana shut it down immediately. "You don't misunderstand your father into the ocean." Meanwhile, Jackson dropped off a second recording. Apparently, He'd recorded a conversation from 2 nights before the trip. She'd been in the lounge area, speaking on the phone with someone, unaware Jackson was refilling the ice tray behind the bar. "She doesn't even sign her own documents anymore," she'd said. "Half the things in his name, he hasn't looked at in years. If I time it right, all of it's mine." It was all falling apart because she left too many threads. And now every single one was being pulled. By day 3, investigators had gone through her laptop with a warrant and found a digital draft of a petition to the court requesting sole control over my finances. Her reasoning: mental instability, aging cognition, isolated behavior. All of it documented in a timeline she'd fabricated. Doctor's appointments that didn't exist. Claims of memory issues that no one could verify. Statements she planned to have friends sign, most likely through pressure or exchange. But now, no one would sign anything. That evening, I visited the marina again. Not to see the yacht, but to talk to the captain. He'd worked that ship for over a decade, and I needed to know whether he'd noticed anything before I ever set foot on it that day. She was polite but persistent, he said. Asked about emergency exits, the life vests, if any parts of the deck weren't monitored. "And you didn't think to mention that sooner?" "I didn't think she was planning to kill anyone," he answered honestly. Fair point. It had been 12 days since she pushed me off the yacht. Not 2 weeks, but long enough for everything she built to collapse in real time. The world she'd constructed out of polished words, clean makeup, and tailored lies began to rot the moment I walked back onto that dock alive. And now, the cracks weren't just visible, they were gaping open. Every meeting since that day had brought another unraveling. Every email her legal team sent had fewer demands and more desperation. But none of that mattered, because we weren't negotiating anymore. We were finishing it. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The kind of place where silence didn't mean peace. It meant the storm was watching. Her trial didn't draw cameras. It wasn't publicized the way she probably imagined it would be if she ever became famous. No press waiting outside, no paparazzi flashes. Just a quiet federal courtroom, polished floors, padded chairs, and a judge who didn't blink when her attorney tried to delay the inevitable. The prosecution went first. They didn't waste time on drama. They played the recordings. They brought out Jackson. They listed the cruise statements and then dropped the biggest piece: her digital trail. Emails to a friend in Florida outlining a change of estate strategy. File folders where she stored versions of a fake medical report. Memos to herself about documenting slippage in behavior, and notes to remind herself to ask me about memory lapses in front of witnesses. And then there was me. I didn't speak to accuse. I spoke to confirm what happened on that deck, what she said before she pushed me. The moment in the water where I realized nobody was coming because she didn't want them to. The intent wasn't buried. It was clear, even before she put her hands on me. Her lawyer pushed back, of course. Claimed it was a mistake. That I slipped. That I was emotional. That I was exaggerating. But every argument sounded weaker than the last. Because the truth didn't flinch. She never took the stand. That was the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Not when the arrest happened, not when the charges hit. But here, in this room, when they asked if she'd testify, she shook her head once and looked down. No rebuttal, no explanation, just silence. Because this time, the risk wasn't just losing money or reputation. It was losing her freedom. The verdict came fast. Guilty on attempted murder. Guilty on financial coercion. Guilty on falsifying medical documents. Sentencing was scheduled for the following week, but the judge didn't wait long to speak. "You weaponized trust," he said, reading from his decision. "You didn't act in the heat of passion or under pressure. You acted with precision, with patience, with planning. And the only reason you failed is because the person you tried to erase refused to stay gone." She didn't cry. She didn't ask for leniency. She just sat there, still and expressionless, as though this wasn't real, as though none of it had anything to do with her, like her world hadn't just been boxed and labeled by court documents. The sentence was 15 years, no parole until 11 served. White-collar criminals usually get easier paths, but this wasn't embezzlement. It was attempted murder. And she wasn't some desperate daughter trying to pay off debt. She was an architect of her father's disappearance. When they led her out of the courtroom, she didn't look at me. She stared ahead, eyes locked on the door. She didn't say a word. Maybe she thought silence would preserve her dignity. Maybe she still believed, somewhere deep down, that this wasn't the end, that she'd appeal, that she'd come back stronger. But that door closed behind her, and it didn't open again.